Welcome to episode 58 of the Talking Friars podcast. Ben Fadden here with a special guest, Ernie Martinez, a longtime radio host, did Extra 1360 most recently before stepping away. Thanks so much, Ernie, for joining the show.
Ben, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I appreciate it. Go Pods.
Yep, exactly. How's retirement treating you now?
Well, I haven't retired. I moved out of radio. I do have a degree in graphic design, so I got a job with a graphic design company here in Poway, California, and just started moving forward on that in my degree, and I've learned a lot in just the short 5 weeks I've been there.
Sounds good. Let's move to the Padres. How baffling is it to you that this team, who is the second best team, on paper, at least in my opinion, behind the Dodgers this year, going in, how baffling is it to you that they could now miss the playoffs? They're not even in a playoff spot right now.
Yeah, it's crazy. I heard today that they got to go 8-10 to drop below, avoid not being under 500. And that, to me, was the most profound thing I've heard during this spiral that they've been in, because it's just thinking, this is a team going in that I predicted that'd be at least a 95, 96 win team. And I said, if the pitching goes well and everything with the hype around Fernando Tatis Jr. and a full season, Manny Machado right there in the big part of his career and everything else, just the excitement, even at that time with Jake Cronenworth. You never knew if he was going to experience the sophomore slump, but he picked up right where he went off. But when I heard that today, it really was significant just to think where this team was 2 months ago and just the excitement. And for me, it's just they're not playing the way we saw them play in the short season last year. They sort of had a little bit of it. The first injury to Fernando was pretty early on and seemed to change things a little bit. But we just haven't seen that Fernando, and I really wished when they moved him out of shortstop, I just wish it would have been for a brief period of like a week or so. I just felt that the quicker you put him back at his natural position, that we might have seen a little bit more excitement, and there could have been better results as of this point right now. But it is very baffling to see the way this team has played recently. Granted, they're dealing with some injuries, and at the same time, Ben, I really knew it was going to be a challenge for them to try to put a full season with extended baseball in October together, the way they were going to utilize their pitching going into this season. To me, I just at some point, those guys are going to tire out, and I think that's a big part of it. And, you don't expect the injuries to Yu Darvish and the things that Blake Snell went through, but it's happened. But to me, I really thought going in that it was going to be a tough ride for this Padres bullpen to do that. And the only team I've ever seen do it successfully was the Royals in back-to-back season when they lost the Giants and they came back the next year. They were able to put a start out there for 5 or 6 innings, and they were able to get it done with a 6th inning, 7th inning, 8th inning, 9th inning. But the Padres just haven't been able to duplicate that, like a lot of other teams have had to be put in that situation.
Right. How would you assess the job that Jayce Tingler's done this season? Last year, he didn't have the DH, so, maybe the flaws didn't really show. I mean, that Dodger game this year where he used 3 pitchers, in that 5 spot behind your arguably two of your best hitters in the lineup, I think was, inexcusable. That he didn't have that to, deal with last year. What would you think of how he's dealt with that just as a whole as a manager this season?
Yeah, I think like a lot of us, we were wondering, when they made the announcement, Jayce Tingler who? And then the season doesn't start and you're still wondering last season, what kind of manager is going to be. And I think the one thing that you talk about that game, those are things that have stuck out, in the full season. But I think the one thing that a lot of us just sort of got a kick out of is how he said he managed games in his mind going in. To me, I said, okay, that might be a little bump in the road, but let's give the guy an opportunity. Maybe he's going to be somebody we don't know. And I'm all about allowing somebody to do that. But I think now what we've seen in a 162 game season so far, that there has been some things that have been overwhelming to him. Case in point, as you mentioned, and I hate to kick people out of town, but I just don't think right now, the way to answer your question, what Tingler has shown this season is he's the right guy for this Padres team right now. I mean, to me, it was really no different than Andy Green. I mean, he could have just left Andy Green in there in that situation. At least he had put some time in, but he wore his welcome out now. So I really still believe in Jayce Tingler, Prowler. And I want to. I think I'm a fan of his. I want to see him succeed. Has he made all the right moves? No, he hasn't. He's done some exciting things that other general managers with the Padres have not been allowed to do. With that being said, I think he needs to, at least going into the next season, make the best decision for this team moving forward. And I don't know if that's going to be Jayce Tingler with his Padres team. That's the way I feel. I just feel if you're going to win championships the way this ownership said they want to over the next decade, that they were going to flirt with it, there were going to be opportunities, and there was going to be a championship. I believe in the ownership 100%. I have since this ownership took over, and I still believe that. But I think, AJ Prowler has to make some big decisions moving into 2022.
Do you think that he could, bump in the road in terms of his decision that's probably going to be looming in this offseason about whether to keep Tingler or not? Do you think his personal relationship with him could end up getting in the way?
Yeah, I mean, that's just the human side, and Prowler is very much that. I mean, he's not one of these hardcore general managers that we've seen in the past, but bottom line, baseball is a business. We want it to be a game, but we obviously have seen that portion really get overshadowed just by, hey, it's a business. When you see teams winning championships, you look at the way they put things together, the way they dissected going into a championship season. They're going to make moves that fans aren't going to be happy about, or they got to make the best move for the organization. That's what they're being hired for, and that's what I hope AJ Prowler does. Unless he sees something, or unless Jayce Tingler shows something over the next couple of weeks, he's got a lot to prove. Whether AJ Prowler is going to keep him, but yeah, I think just the way that AJ brought him in to this opportunity is he's got to deal with it. It's going out, whether they're great friends, that brother-to-brother relationship. You got to have those talks and got to make those decisions what's best. And I hope it works out for both sides. And I hope it works out for the Padres and their fans here, because like you, Ben, we all want to see a championship sometime soon. And right now, I don't know if that's the direction they're headed in with Jayce Tingler.
Mm-hmm. What were your thoughts on the Larry Rothschild firing? For me, I didn't really like the mixed messaging that Tingler provided, to the media after that happened, saying that it was 100% his decision, but then it took 10 to 12 days after he told Preller about it for it to actually happen. There's a narrative that Rothschild contributed to a lot of these pitchers' injuries, and injuries have continued to happen, with Ben Fritz as now the main interim pitching coach, whether that's Snow with the groin, Paddock now with the elbow. What were your thoughts on that, and I guess the messaging around that?
Yeah, I was never a big fan of Rothschild. I mean, just like with Tingler and B brought in, I guess I was looking from my old school baseball mentality. You sort of bring in guys that have been there and have been around championships before. And I know Rothschild has been there, but to me from the get-go, it just didn't seem like there was a lot of connection there. And I think as the season progressed, there wasn't that connection between he and the staff. Now, when it comes to injuries, I think those can go both ways. I mean, my thought as a pitching coach is you got to mentally prepare them that day that they're out there, or help them mentally prepare to get ready the day after or before going. And you got to keep them loose. To me, as far as when it comes to injuries, I think that's more on the player themselves, or maybe we put a little bit more responsibility on the trainers and the way they're doing things. I don't want to put blame on anybody, but I think to sort of put the injury bug on Rothschild. And if something's not working for a pitcher that Rothschild is suggesting, then that pitcher has to say, hey, this isn't working, and they got to figure that out. So I don't know if the injuries are so much me personally blaming Rothschild for that. I personally just never saw him as the fit and the right guy for this Padres team going into the season.
Mm-hmm. Moving to another guy that may or may not be the right guy moving forward, we have to talk about Eric Hosmer. Going into his Padres tenure, I think a lot of fans, were really happy about it. The big name, big first baseman, $144 million. That's a lot of money, especially from where the Padres were just a couple of years ago. But he obviously hasn't performed, and that contract is definitely one of the reasons why fans are, really, really mad about Hosmer and his production, whether that's his bad defense all of a sudden, or just, ground balls to second all the time and strikeouts. What have been your thoughts on his, Padre tenure? And do you think that he can, rebound? And if he's even on the team next year, I guess is my question. Do you think he'll be here? And do you think that he has the ability to rebound now, even though, his decline, the decline's there. It's obviously there. He's obviously not getting any younger. Just what are your thoughts on Hosmer?
Well, outside of the Padres, the Royals have been one of my second favorite teams since '77. As a young kid, started getting into baseball. That was a George Brett, Al Cowens, John Mayberry, Freddie Patek, that era, Darrell Porter of the Royals. And so I've always followed the Royals as well. And I saw that the way they drafted en route to that World Series, and obviously Hosmer, from the outside looking in, was a big part of that. And he was, there's no doubt about that. So I was a huge proponent to bringing him here to San Diego. And I even said when they signed him, this is by far the biggest free agent signing at that time by this organization, outside of Steve Garvey. I mean, as a first baseman, a guy who was a leader. Garvey was much older, but he left a lasting impression. He helped lead the team to the '84 season. You go back in time like that. But that, to me, was how big this signing was for the Padres. And it has been very disappointing. I know he had the breakout season with nearly 100 RBI a couple of years ago. But to me, that should have been somewhat what we saw from him the first season he was here. I expected him to be more of a leader. And I know we talk about leadership qualities. You don't see that leadership role being played out on the field all the time as a fan, and especially with media now that you can't go into the clubhouse, you can't see that aspect of some of these players. So I'm very disappointed. I think it was very fair for the questions that were asked of him prior to the trading deadline that he thought were insulting to him. I think he has to understand, and I'm sure he does, but we're all humans. It's tough for us to get out of a hole. It's tough to admit something that we don't want. And he probably knows that he hasn't lived up to what they brought him in here for, $144 million, followed by the contract that they gave Manny Machado, and then what they did to Fernando Tatis. That's money to win a championship. And Eric Hosmer has not, in my opinion, done his part, especially at first base defensively. As you said, I look at him sometimes often over the last couple of years, and I just go like, God, that's not the guy that we saw in Kansas City, or at least I saw. And so I highly doubt that he'll be with the Padres next season, or at least throughout the entire season of next season.
Okay. And now moving to one of his teammates, Fernando. Obviously, the Padres not in a playoff spot right now. The odds don't look great for them making the postseason, comparing to, the Cardinals and Reds and their schedules and the way they're playing. 0-5 to start a road trip is absolutely terrible. You can't have that. But with that said, if they don't make the playoffs, they still have Fernando. And do you think he can win the MVP still?
Yeah, I think he can. But we need to see a little bit more of the Fernando that we saw when he's that exciting player. And I think just by the play of the team and everything that has surrounded this team, the demise of this team has really challenged him. I mean, I think he's learning right now. He's going to be that guy. He's going to be in the shoes of Manny Machado, where people are looking at him. And that's very close. And I think he's developing that mentally, and he's trying to go through what that takes to be that guy and to get to that level, because we know he's that guy. He's healthy. We see the excitement that he brings. So, yeah, I think if we could see Fernando, despite what happens to the record, just really be a motivating factor to this team, because he's going to be here for the next 13, 14 years. Mm-hmm. Some of these other guys that we're talking about aren't. He's going to be here. And I think that's how he's going to leave his legacy, is by continuing to be that guy. He's going to have his moments. He's going to have those trials and tribulations. And I think he's going through that right now. But I think if he could just get back to Fernando, because he's a guy that could turn the switch on. And I really hope it begins tonight. And I think that could give him a strong push to still be crowned the MVP of the National League.
I think one aspect that helps him in that case is that he's not in the outfield now. He's back at his comfortable position. He can, he's more involved now. He's not as bored as it seemed like he was in the outfield. And it seems like, when he plays shortstop, he's at home. There's people, saying that Tatis, his offensive numbers declined when he was in the outfield because of the position change. And that, I think, was total, BS, because when you're at the plate, you're not thinking about, oh, I'm playing right field today, I'm mad. No, you're trying to hit. So that doesn't change. But with that said, I think he can enter games and he can be more involved in games. And I think that can only, elevate his play. And I think, I don't know how he'd explain it, but the stats do, tell the story that he's a better player when he's at shortstop. I can't explain why, but that's, offensive numbers. I don't know about you, but is there a reasoning, do you think, for that?
Well, look, you bring out a couple of good points. Just thinking of the two things that popped out when you said that was Major League Baseball is no different than Little League. And I guess it's only because my son plays Little League, and your best player is always at shortstop at the Little League position. And it's really no different at the Major League level. I mean, Fernando brings so much when he's playing up the middle, as you said, his natural position. He doesn't have to think about, am I going to run into the wall today? He knows that area at shortstop, position 6. He knows that. So to me, when you take that away, and I think when it comes to those offensive numbers, I think it could hinder him a little bit because he was so focused on trying to be as good as he was at short. Now, it shouldn't, and I think that's part of what I said earlier, those trials that he's going through, where he had to focus on playing another position, and maybe he was thinking too much about it, where he didn't feel as comfortable playing short. But no, I agree with you. Baseball is all about numbers. It's all about stats. That's what the game of baseball has been looked at for 152 years. That's why we buy baseball cards and guys go into the Hall of Fame. It's all about numbers. And if those numbers aren't where we think they should be with a player, then we look at them a little differently. And I think I'm not personally looking at Fernando any differently because those numbers have fallen. I still think he's that guy. But when it comes to numbers, those numbers don't lie.
Now, moving to, I hate placing blame on people that don't directly affect the results of winning and losing, right? The players. But how much blame would you put on AJ Preller if the Padres don't make the postseason? I wouldn't put much blame at all on him. Yes, people want to bash him for the trade deadline, but his job as a general manager is to put the Padres in the best position to succeed on paper. And that's exactly what he did going into this season. Circumstances changed, but I talked with John Schaefer a couple weeks ago. That was his trade deadline, I feel like, was the offseason, right? Yeah, he got Frazier and Hudson and Marisnick, but those are moves that were made, but they weren't, as big, right? I feel like his deadline, it was Snell, Darvish, Musgrove, Melanson, Kella. I know that didn't work, but Kella, there's just guys that you can point to, even going back to the previous offseason with Grisham and all those guys. So I think that he put the team in the best position to succeed on paper going into the season, and they just haven't succeeded. So how much blame would you really put on him?
Yeah, and like I said earlier, I still believe in AJ Preller. I think the biggest move that he will have to make is the decision what he's going to do with Tingler and at that manager's position. To me, like you said, I can't knock AJ Preller. People look back at 2015, and I said, but in that moment, during that 2-week span as a Padre fan, you were looking at a team that was getting close to 100 lost seasons. And then he comes in and he traded the farm system away, but there was the excitement. It didn't work out. And, they had to go back and rethink things and redo things. And he got them to where they're at. He's made the signings. It's the guys, I'm one of those people. It's the players. They're the ones who have to go out there and get the job done. I think Preller has given them the finances. He has given this team everything to succeed, and they just haven't done it. Granted, once again, injuries come into play. It's how you recover from them. And outside of that, Preller, to me, has done a decent job where he deserves to come back. And as mentioned, I think the biggest decision he'll have to make is who's going to lead this team, who's going to be the right mindset for the majority of this team moving forward. Who's going to be that guy? I don't know. People keep talking about it's time to bring Bruce Bochy in. Is Bochy the guy? Can he still manage? I think he can. Is he going to be that guy with this organization? Do something like that. And that lies on AJ Preller. Now, I think if they go through another season of this next season, then we have to start thinking of AJ Preller not being here in San Diego, looking at what he tried to get done here, and that's to win championships. So, yeah, right now, I'm a big believer of AJ Preller. He's brought people in that were able to make this team a winner into October, and that just hasn't happened yet. But I don't place all of that on AJ Preller.
One move that I literally just saw that just happened, Vince Velasquez signed with the Padres now. He's playing catch in the outfield. I know this, you probably don't know about this. I literally just got it. Padres just tweeted that out. What would be your thoughts on that addition?
Well, I'm not really familiar with Vince Velasquez. Maybe you can help me out with a little bit of that.
Played with the Phillies a little bit. When I've watched him, you can definitely see the upside there, but it's just inconsistency. A little bit like Blake Snell this year, but the upside's definitely there. And I think you could see him coming out of the bullpen. You could see him starting in place of an Arrieta. It's an interesting signing, I think.
Yeah, no, now that you mention it, yeah. You know what? But you know what, too, Ben? And the crazy thing is, I hope it works for the Padres. There's still a chance. But these are the players we didn't think they were going to be going after at this time. And, Derwiller and all these other guys that they've brought in, it's just like, I was thinking about that as I was watching the game last night. I was thinking these weren't supposed to be parts to this puzzle this year. And look, if it's going to make this a better team, I hope it works for the Padres. And to go back real quickly where, they bring in Frazier, they bring in Marisnick, those were additions to bring some experience to the team. And I think, I was excited about Frazier coming in here, but he wasn't the same guy he was in Pittsburgh. And I think part of that too is when you're playing in Pittsburgh and you're not really playing for a lot, and then you come to a team that you're getting thrown into the fire and there's a lot being asked for you, that's something that Frazier could be dealing with, because somebody brought up the fact, like, you see Mateo tearing it up in Pittsburgh. Yeah, but Mateo there's nothing going on in Pittsburgh. He can go out there and just
Baltimore, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or Baltimore. I go, you could just go and play and have fun in the game. You come to a situation, and so that's part of the difference of Prowler being a general manager, bringing those right guys in here. And I think he can. We'll see what Velasquez can do, and hopefully this is a team that can put a lot of smiles on Padres fans here over the next couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm. Last one real quick. Do you think the Padres end up making the postseason?
I'll tell you, if they can win tonight, I'm talking from my heart. If they can win tonight, that's one foot in front of the other moving forward. So I'll say yes as of right now. But as you mentioned, they haven't won in this road trip. And when you're playing teams in your division, and then you go into the city where now you're fighting the Cardinals for another wild card team, it's not going to be easy tonight in San Francisco, and it's not going to get any easier in St. Louis, because I've been there before when the Padres had to win big games, and they've fallen short, different teams, but we'll see. So I say if they win tonight, I'm going to keep the faith and say, yeah, all the way to the end.
All right. That's the right thinking. All right. This has been episode 58 of the Talking Friars podcast. Ben Fadden, Ernie Martinez. Ernie, thanks so much for taking the time to talk.
Ben, my pleasure. Thank you for thinking of me, and go Pods.